What are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. What are we doing? So here we are with my friend Jay Gammill. Jay is an amazing editor, an amazing filmmaker. He has actually done something I haven't done yet, which is direct to feature, write and direct to feature.
I didn't write it.
Oh, you didn't write it?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I thought you did. Well, okay. I gave you credit when you probably didn't deserve it. Sorry. So I wanted to get Jay on the horn, on the camera, on the Skype call, whatever we're doing right here. And I just wanted to ask a bunch of questions about the entertainment industry. So why don't we get to it? Let's see here. So when you were a kid, what made you want to be a filmmaker? What made you want to get into the film industry?
I think I was just mesmerized by movies, and I had a camcorder. My dad bought a camcorder. I forgot how old I was. It was like maybe 8 or 9, and it was VHS, and I just was liking all these fun videos and like doing tricks, visual tricks, all sorts of editing things in camera, like because I had software. And then at some point I graduated to like a switcher, like a two source switcher, using RCA cables and then an output, and I could do fades.
Nice.
So like I was definitely kind of exploring that.
Okay.
I was also like very involved in visual arts, so it just kind of made sense, and I kind of figured it out by the time I was 17 or 18 that I wanted to go that direction. I didn't know where I would end up,
right?
But I just thought, media, let's try it.
Yeah. Nice. Now, did you where did you go to school?
So I went when I was an undergrad, I was figuring it out. I went to Baylor University for undergrad. And I did like a summer program at USC and then the summer program at NYU.
Oh, wow.
Their film schools. Nice. And that was like, doing both of those really made me realize it's like, I definitely want to pursue filmmaking in some aspect. So then I applied for grad school at USC. Okay. And so I went there and did their MFA production program, and it was like 3 or 4 years. But it was, there's stuff I learned there and friends I made there that have contributed to my current, success, for lack of a better word. But it's like that group of people has been helpful.
Is there a reason you chose USC? Did you apply to anywhere else?
So I applied to USC, NYU, and Cal Arts.
Okay.
Cal Arts, in retrospect, I think would have been a much more interesting experience from what I've heard since. I had no idea when I was there. It's like I remember I went and toured it when I was 18 years old. And I was like, this is so beautiful and I love it and it's so artsy. But I don't know. Like there's a lot of great people that come out of there. Obviously, it's just much more in the experimental. Which
is funny because I visited USC. I think it was I want to say it was a month or two before the riots happened in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Yeah. I was, I grew up in the Midwest. So, I grew up in Oklahoma. So, not just north of Baylor.
Not too far from me.
Yeah. And so I remember when we revisited the campus at USC and seeing that USC had its own police force. Kind of freaked me out a little bit, so that was intimidating for me, and probably one of the only. I only have like a couple of professional regrets, and one of those is not applying. I didn't even apply to USC. I was intimidated like nothing else.
Sure.
I ended up going to Columbia College in Chicago, which. Was I think exactly perfect for what I needed to do. Anyway, getting back to USC and film school, that actually kind of leads into the next question that I had is, do you think that film school is important? Do you think it's necessary?
Not necessary, no. think it's useful. I think it's useful if you want a film history, a film history perspective, and just kind of like having the guidance of people who have been in the business, kind of, know the, especially like if you're having trouble, what's the word? Like, if you're having trouble disciplining yourself, like it's great. So I imagine most, young people nowadays, it's like if they're not doing TikTok or YouTube videos, it's like they're like, what I see on TikTok is like that's experimental film, and they probably don't even know it. Yeah. But there's like a real history there, and that I really enjoyed learning about. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I didn't think about TikTok in that point of view. That actually makes me think about TikTok in a completely different way. But you are absolutely right with that. Is that it's experimental in the same way that the French New Wave filmmaking was experimental in various different things. So that's actually a really good point, and makes me think about things like TikTok and Snapchat a lot differently.
Oh yeah.
So one of the other things that when somebody asks me about film school, one of my thoughts is, and I think you kind of you mentioned this a little bit too. If you need structure, and if you need that kind of classroom environment to help you and to move you along, then it's very, very good. The other thing too is I have often said that I think film school is a good place for you to fail and to learn how to fail. Oh yeah, because it's safe. It's a much safer place to learn how to fail and use that failure to succeed. Than it would be in the real life, because in real life. So the other, I think you would attest to this as well too, especially since you went to USC, and you also mentioned this a little bit as well too, is film school is less about what you're learning and more about who you're learning it with. True. You have, because I've often gotten the question, should I go to USC? Should I go to NYU? Should I go to Full Sail in Florida? Should I go to, Columbia College in Chicago? And I always answer, well, it depends on who you want to go to school with, because, when the education is all the same. I would assume that you would probably agree with me on that, is that what you're learning is going to be the same no matter which school you go to, relatively speaking. Structure is probably a little different with each school, but you're paying for the network you're paying for the quality of network that you get access to. You went to USC, so you have access to a network of people that I wouldn't necessarily have access to.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's the people in my immediate class, and like, they're above and beyond, or not above and beyond, but like above and below the class years that I was there. It's like the famous people that went there, sure, that may, give me some clout, I guess, but it's not like I can call up any of the famous alums and just get a job.
Wait, you can't? I think you can't call up George Lucas and just chat?
I did, but I mean, I broke into his compound. It was a whole thing, but
oh, that was you.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Or it was either that or an episode of South Park. I forgot which.
Oh, that's a great episode.
No, I mean, I just think like the people that you do are with any school you're in, it's like you can learn from them just as much as you learn from your teachers. True. And like that collaboration, especially filmmaking, on the broad is a collaboration. So learning that skill early on is probably the most important, and I'm still, it's like every job I have now is just a challenge. It's like, okay, it's like this person's working in this particular style,
right?
And I need to adapt to so that we can make the best product.
Yeah.
That's the.
So what would you? I mean, do you have any advice for up and coming filmmakers? What's the best advice that you've ever gotten? Do you have anything?
I don't know that there's like a best advice I've ever gotten. I think the things that have changed me, that I've like the lessons that I've learned are to is like, number one, attitude is like key. Good attitude, like I've learned that time and again. I had tell me one time, it's like, I was editing on a show, and it's like, and I forgot what I was doing, but I was like, I wasn't happy about what I was doing, but it was like the producer called me out. I was like, you know what? He's 100% right. I'm not helping anything by being precious with the material, by being, having an ego. And so like that's to me has helped, or I find as invaluable to having success. I mean, I know that doesn't, maybe that just speaks to me and my personality.
No, I think that's very valid.
I think that's like the main thing. It's and never assume that I know everything.
True. Okay.
Because I don't, or it's like I was on a job earlier this year, and then I learned some new Avid trick that I never knew before. It was like, oh, you can do that? It's like.
So humility, you would say humility is a good quality to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think humility may have connotations with it that people don't like.
True.
But I would just say, like, it's a willingness to.
It's been my experience.
Put yourself in the.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's like trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes,
right?
The network's shoes,
right.
The studio's shoes, seeing like, yeah, they want to do this to your show. It's like the note behind the note idea of like, they may say something that you absolutely despise what they say, or then you read a note in an email from, your boss or a producer, anything like that. But it's like, what can I take from this note,
right.
and try to make it better?
Right.
It's still some ownership over what I'm making. I mean, what I'm speaking to is more like when you're working for other people.
Right.
So obviously that's mostly what people are doing in film school. You're working for yourself.
True.
But, and you're perhaps pleasing or not pleasing your professors.
Would you say that would also depend on what department you're in? Like, would you say that having those qualities are important to be an editor, but maybe if you want to direct, there would be, I mean, I guess on a certain level, it doesn't matter what role you're playing in the filmmaking process, because at some point, like you had said earlier too, it's a collaborative process. So you're all working towards the same goal. But a director is as the captain of the ship. So the director is the one that's moving things forward. The director typically has the final say so in a lot of those things. You've had the privilege of wearing two different hats, being a director and being an editor. How would you say things would be different if you were a director as opposed to an editor in a situation, any given situation?
I think that, or my experience being a director was I definitely had to know what I was doing, I wanted. Like, I had to have that creative vision.
Right.
I had to be able to execute it. And there were times people, heads of department would say, well, what about this? And we're really strongly pushing for it. And I thought, no, that's incorrect. That doesn't fit with the vision. Not incorrect maybe is like, whatever. But like, it doesn't fit with my vision. And I'm also like the whole movie in my head.
Yeah.
Which is what I was finding was that most people on set were not doing that, and maybe that's the best way for them to operate.
Right.
But even actors, it's like, I'm coming at a scene. It's like, I know what we've shot that's going to cut to right before the scene. So it's like, I know lots of things. And so even actors, and we're all fallible, but like, you really do have to stick guns, and that's a skill that you have to learn if you don't have it already. I mean, there's certainly personality types that are more ego driven, that just run away with things, and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
I just find that's, as much as I would love to be that kind of a personality type, it's just not me. And so I was fighting that, or I would be fighting that rather, if I were not being more collaborative.
Yeah.
And so I definitely was like involving people, in decisions that I thought were crucial to because I want a cinematographer, I want production designer, I want the actors to have ownership over what they're doing too.
Exactly. And you get a better product.
That's when I feel most. That's when I feel most empowered and most creative and most willing to give my best.
Yeah.
So that's kind of method. That was my directing, and then
I know I've had a few opportunities where I've been able to just solely direct, as opposed to being the shooter, the director, the editor, the writer, and whatnot. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you that there is something really empowering about being able to focus on one task and not have to be overwhelmed with, okay, is the framing right? Is the composition right? Is the lighting right? Is the audio right? Is, entrusting those things to the professionals that you've brought on to take care of those things really does allow you to kind of shine in your particular task at hand, which is directing. I mean, you have you just said, you have so many other things on your mind. The last thing that you want to do is worry about the lighting or worrying about the composition or anything like that.
100%. Yeah.
I heard Henry Winkler say one time when somebody asked him what he thought was, I'm trying to remember how was that question asked of him? I think somebody asked him what he thought would be the best thing for an up and coming filmmaker to learn, and his response was, more so, he didn't say don't go to film school, but he was basically saying, if you're going to go to film school, that's fine and that's great, that's wonderful, but as a director, probably one of the most important things that you can learn is the psychology of humans. And and he was actually even almost, I think he even said, take a psychology class, learn psychology. That's more important than learning cinematography or learning another department or whatever. And would you agree with that? I mean, especially when it comes to dealing with actors.
I don't know if it's the most important thing. I find that's a subject that always interested me, and I mean, I think that's your intuition, your empathy for humans is kind of that's kind of what I would say drew me to filmmaking as well. So it's like when you are able to communicate with people on their level, that's ideal. Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting.
Would you say, here's kind of a far out there question. Would you say editing is a left-brained task or a right-brained task? In other words, would you say editing, specifically editing, is more creative or more logical?
I think it's 50-50. I mean, I think there's people on both sides.
Right.
Like, I know people who are more creative, and like you look at their timelines and it's just like a mess. And you get other people that are more structured and they're, more logical.
Right.
But I think that's why it works for me, because I have a desire for both of those kinds of tasks. It's one of the. I don't know. Maybe do you think there's moments in filmmaking 50-50 or
well,
maybe
Jay,
sound or
I'm glad you asked that question, because that actually leads me to the next question.
That was not a softball.
Because to answer that question, actually, I guess you could say my answering the question would lead to the next question, which is, I think it depends. I think it depends sometimes more on the type of project that you're editing, because narrative or scripted, as what's typically called scripted, whether it's television or feature or drama, is more linear. You have a script, you have an outline of how things are moving, and in television, it's yes, there's the director, but it's also the showrunner. The showrunner is the king on a TV show. So if you're working on Big Bang Theory and you've got Chuck Lorre, who's the showrunner, Chuck Lorre, it's Chuck Lorre's show. Bill Prady, is his partner on that show? Okay. But so they have a specific vision of what the show is. Now, typically when you have a sitcom like that, everybody is on the same page with however it should go. And a sitcom is a little different than, say, Modern Family, which is single camera. But the point being is, it's, the script is there and the script is there for you to follow. But you do a lot of reality TV, and reality is different. Yes, you have a sense of your work because you're working with a producer. So, story, is it a story
producer? Yeah.
So they have an understanding of what's kind of been shot and whatnot, and so you're working with them to craft the story. But I would venture to say that in reality, there's a lot more creativity in the process of telling that story.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned from because I've done some scripted TV web series and a lot of unscripted reality and competition shows, I find that the creative control in reality is it's on the editor. It's so there's more weight, given to the editor's abilities and creativity to come up with stuff or to make something work, continuity-wise, whatever it may be, story-wise. There's a lot of times where I'll show a cut of something, and it's rarely, there'll be notes, but it's not let's rethink this from the get-go. Unlike, whereas it's scripted, it's let's look at what it takes. There's the trust given, probably because there's no time. Right. But also, if it works, it works. Why mess something up? Yeah. But I definitely rely on the producers because they're, in theory, watching all of the footage on an episode of something or, whatever they're assigned. Because different shows, you may have several producers on an episode. You may have one and some assists.
Now, let me ask you this when it comes to reality TV. When you're working on a show, do you look at all the footage on the episode that you're working on?
I look at, maybe not all the footage for the episode, but whatever scene I'm given. Okay. I definitely watch all that footage. Okay. And then I'll make selects, because sometimes I'll find stuff that I think either editorially works better than because the story producer will generally give you a string out of here's the story beats. And here's the story that we're telling. Here's some bites. And so I take that and then but I'm not going to just slap music under it. I need to actually make it television. Right. So that involves trying to see what else is there. I can only do so much. So sometimes, and some producers can only do so much too. True. Sometimes producers, depending on the show, are very much in sync from episode to episode. Sometimes it's a little wavy, but in theory, the producers, co-EPs or EPs above them have an eye on that. And so you just have to go with the flow and trust that they've got it handled. Otherwise, you just go crazy.
I met, and I'm so bad that I don't remember the gal's name, but I met an editor of Project Runway years ago when it was still on Bravo, I think, when it was still on Bravo. And, that was one of the things that I was blown away when I was talking to her is she because correct me if I'm wrong on this. I've never edited reality TV, but typically you'll get a string out of stuff that is relevant to whatever story that you're working on, or whatever it is that you're working on, and that string out has been put together by the assistant editor. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but
maybe
what she had said to me, which blew me away, is that she likes to watch all of the footage, every camera angle, and I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, do you ever come out of that edit bay? I mean, how do you because on a reality show, I mean, they've got hundreds of hours of footage.
Yeah. But it's all grouped usually, so I can watch it with multi-camera. Okay. I mean, I can't listen to every microphone at the same time. True. That's the real limitation. So like on a competition show, I would, solo the mics of whatever team or person that I'm wanting to follow and track, or two teams or whatever, and then I'm gonna watch. But I'll probably watch it however many teams there are, or however many people. I will watch the footage that many times. So if there's 2 hours of footage, I will watch, in 10 teams I will watch 20 hours.
Right.
But then at some point, like, you can kind of get a sense of what's happening. Right. So you don't really have to, you can kind of go at double speed or triple speed.
Okay. One of the things that I realized that I probably forgot to give you an opportunity to do at the beginning of this was to let everyone know your credits. I mean, I know what your credits are because we're friends.
Sure.
But like, what shows have you worked on? So answer that question, but you could also probably think about too, because that was the next question that I was going to be was, oh no, that wasn't the next question. But the point of what I was thinking about in terms of you giving a list of your credits was, what are some of your favorite shows and what are some of your least favorite shows? I guess you don't have to mention least favorite shows for political reasons, but
I hate. So like nowadays I do a lot of reality competition shows. Probably the most notable was The Amazing Race. I've done 3 seasons of that, twice nominated for Emmys for both of for seasons 30 and 31.
I was going to say, I thought it was consecutive years.
Yes, it was. And then 32 I worked on, but it hasn't aired yet. I think it airs in the fall.
Okay.
And then I recently did the Netflix fashion competition show Next in Fashion, which is kind of like a alternative to Project Runway, I think is how they were kind of, that's their competition.
Right.
And then I've done, a number of, I was working on Lego Masters.
I was just going to say.
This winter, I'm like,
didn't you just get done working on a big show?
I've lost my memory. This whole situation. I'm just like, I can't remember things.
Yep. Nope. I know what you're talking about. 2 months. 2 months in quarantine does something to you.
Oh man. Yeah. So those are the more recent. There's probably something else of note, but I've done I did a scripted show for YouTube called Single by 30 a few years ago. I did a scripted show for Complex Networks called Grown, and I've not really directed. So I directed this feature film called Free Samples, and I haven't really done anything since then. I don't know. I think I've changed a bit, but it's changed. But it was a really fun movie. It stars Jess Wexler, Eisenberg, Jason. Just a small little fun comedy, and very lucky to. Certainly.
And now you got Jesse Eisenberg on Locked In before Social Network.
Yeah.
Was it before Social Network or was it before Zombieland?
It was like right before Zombieland. Honestly, so the writer of the film, he's friends with Jesse, and that's kind of how that happened. So I think it actually started. I started talking to the writer like in 2007. He had one of my student films from USC Film Festival, just I think it was just like, looking to have some of his scripts made. He's very prolific.
Right.
And I think, it was just very serendipitous how that.
As it usually is sometimes.
And then Jesse was so nice to stay with the project after, because we didn't film until I think Social Network had just been released in theaters, and I think we were filming after that.
Oh wow!
So, but I mean, it was a short shoot.
Yeah. And
he's the love interest, but it's not a comedy. It's
right.
He's enough to that like top billing thing. So like from a risk standpoint,
right?
He's just making a cameo.
Yeah. So getting back to going back to editing, what do you love most about editing? Number one, that's part A. Part B, what do you hate most about editing?
Oh man, what I love, I mean, editing, is lying professionally. So I just love when I put something together that gets either conveys something that was not intended.
I think you start over again. We dropped out a little bit there. Sorry.
So I'm saying that I was saying like editing is essentially lying, and so I like putting something together that was not filmed.
Right.
Not that I say lying about the emotional truth. I'm just putting it together in a way that is emotionally full.
Right.
And that is to me the essence of editing, is like putting stuff together, not like a computer would do, not like you're just doing cut from a line cut if you're
right.
if multiple cameras. So, and then putting that to music and then it saying, what I hate most is like, you get it like some scene and then I'm just like, this is a terrible scene, but I have to cut it.
Right.
I have to cut it even though I think it's going to get cut out.
Right.
But I have to make it good. And so I will go through a day or so of, agony. And so what I've come to like I have a process in which I will just like watch the footage, make selects, just kind of like throw stuff around.
Okay.
Until sometimes it's a trial and error for me.
Okay.
Because like I know some people will like have what they want in mind, and
right.
then frame at a time, pitch perfect.
Okay.
I'm more like sculpting. So like I'll start throwing things to and then I'll do it even further.
Okay.
Because it's something tall order.
So what would you consider good editing?
Editing that doesn't suck.
I like that concise answer. We'll move on to the next one. It's a subjective answer anyway. So I mean,
Well, I think it's like you can recognize good editing. You can also, if you know what the source material is, like you can also recognize.
Well, that was going to be my next. That was kind of what I was getting at is, do you consider good editing something that you don't know? Like, I mean, in visual effects, I know, good visual effects are visual effects that you didn't know existed, that you didn't know were there. Would you say that about editing as well too? I mean, obviously a music video is going to be different than a sitcom or a reality scripted or competition or anything like that. So, I'll give you an example. One of the few TV shows that I worked on was a show for Showtime called The Green Room with Paul Provenza, and we did an episode. In the episode, Jonathan Winters, who is the godfather of comedy, was in there, and he wasn't as snappy as he used to be when he was a younger man. And so one of our main tasks in editing was when he did a joke, make it sound like he was still a man in his prime. And so we were literally, cutting together certain things. So there was that aspect of it. But one of the things, the editor that I was working with on the show, there was a scene in the beginning of how we shot the show. They introduced all of the comedians who were going to be on that particular segment, and so when they introduced Jonathan Winters, there's a standing ovation and everybody's standing up, and of course, it's like everybody's just in love with him and everything like that, and that's all great and dandy and whatever. And then we taped, I think we taped an hour and a half or so, and we had to cut it down to about 22, 23 minutes.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So, but at the end of the show, when they ended the show, I forget exactly what had happened. I think one of the comedians stood up and shook Jonathan Winters' hand or whatever it was. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, the editor that I was working with wanted to cut from the beginning of the show to the end of the show, literally the timeline. So from what happened on minute 1 to what happened on minute, an hour and a half or 90 minutes or whatever it was, we wanted to cut those two together. And I said, there's no way you can do it, because in one instance he's so-and-so standing, and in the other instance he's not. It's like you're not going to be able to do it. And we made a bet. And then of course I lost the bet because he cut it together seamlessly that you would never know that those two instances happened an hour and a half apart. It looked like they were just completely organically happened together. So to me, that's brilliant editing. I mean, that's something that you didn't know existed, that you would never know existed had somebody not told you that. Do you, I would assume, especially in reality, you have a lot of those moments.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of times where you're doing a lot of smoke and mirrors to try to get pieces of scenes to work together.
Right.
That were not, linearly shot together.
Right.
Or, cut to the end of a scene. Sometimes you're actually painting things out and doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Again, nothing. Like I would stress, especially like on competition shows, like all this is, vetted through S&P. So it's like we're not doing anything. We're not like fabricating anything.
Right. Yeah.
But it's sometimes just for visual continuity.
Right. So that actually leads me to something that I just remembered off the top of my head, and I didn't ask you this before, but so there was kind of an internet uproar, social media uproar when John Ottman won the Academy Award for Bohemian Rhapsody. And one of the things, and I think there's YouTube videos out there that break it down, but they basically criticized him for the horrible editing that he did in one particular scene. And in one isolated scene, and I want to say they were at a cafe. I forget what the exact scene was, but they were criticizing him, and I got furious, not just because I've met John Ottman. I can't say that I know him. We're not best friends or anything like that, but he. One of my favorite memories of meeting anybody out here was meeting John Ottman at a party, and one of the most genuine guys that you will ever meet. I mean, I think I was an assistant at the time, and he spent an hour plus talking to me about filmmaking, and just one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet about filmmaking. Wow. And so there was that aspect of it that got me really furious, because I was excited to see that he won an Academy Award, but also too, knowing, and this as an editor as well too, you don't always have the best footage to deal with.
Oh, for sure.
And I know in Bohemian Rhapsody, Bryan Singer got fired, I want to say halfway or 2/3 of the way through the movie. And some of that scene, they had to go back and reshoot. So it it was mind-blowing when I was watching these videos of people, talking about the aesthetics of editing as if they're these big, pariahs in film editing and they know what they're talking about. It really bugs me when people throw around film terms without any context or knowledge of what those terms mean. Oh, he crossed the 180 line. Why did you cut that way? And this, I'm like, really? So as an editor, maybe you can speak to what, because as an editor, sometimes you have to fix bad things like this. Yeah. So is it fair to sit there? In my opinion, that almost makes me feel like he deserves the Academy Award more for fixing a badly shot scene and creating a pacing that probably wasn't there to begin with. Can you speak to that? Can you speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say creating pacing that isn't there is often a task that you have to do, either speeding things up, cutting air out for comedy, or spacing reactions out for dramatic. You just never really know, like, films like sitting on this plethora of amazing, I mean, there's no way to know that they were sitting on like good footage or bad footage. Yeah. So like to criticize the editing, it's like, well, at some point they cut their losses and they decided they didn't want to, I'm just speculating.
Right.
I'm in these conversations like to reshoot this.
Right.
How much can we just get away with editing? Is this an important scene, or we can't get that actor? This actor is unavailable until X, and we have release date, planned with the theaters.
Exactly.
Like all these things that you have no idea, and the editor is there, has to fix it.
Right.
And yeah, I'll never know. It's hard because I put myself in a layperson's shoes and like a non-filmmaker point of view and wondering what that's like. But it's easy to criticize, harder to play the game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing for me was it's easier, being that this is going to be on YouTube, it's easy to sit there and say, when you're in the comfort of your own home and the only person that you're editing is yourself, whether it's a vlog or whatever it is, it's easier to sit there and talk about the aesthetics of editing. It's completely different when you are in the thick of it on a film and you have, just as you said, there might be scheduling issues. They can't reshoot. An actor is not available or whatever it is. There could be a myriad of things, and sometimes you just have to fix it. You just have to.
Right. Or it's just not an important enough scene.
Right.
To spend any more money on.
Exactly.
From a production standpoint.
Exactly. So
that doesn't solve that problem.
I mean, we're all entitled to our own opinion, and and people if there's one thing that I've learned about the internet is people love to pontificate and make themselves sound more important than they actually are. But like me too. Yeah, right. I like that look. I'm going to freeze frame that look. Sorry.
Yay.
There's a meme right there for you coming. No, I don't know. So let me ask you this. What inspires you?
Great question.
Especially considering that you've been locked up for 2 months. How do you stay... Well, I mean, it's probably not a fair question to say how do you stay sane. But like what do you find inspirational? What do you find inspiration in?
Nature mostly, only because it just gives me perspective in that the world is much bigger than whatever's in my head and whatever I'm going through. Yeah. And
that's good.
Just to sit outside. I mean, honestly, it really is, because I kind of was, I don't know, I think I just kind of burned out there for a little while.
Right.
Working in the industry, and I just find like when I spend time in nature, I just realize like that is the most inspirational thing to me, just to watch
right
birds squirrels. I don't know, silly things.
No, I don't think that's silly at all. I don't think that's silly at all. Sometimes, I have the fortunate pleasure of being able to write music, and
for sure.
And there are sometimes, like I think the other night I was just in a really foul mood, and I didn't want to do anything, but I forced myself. I just forced myself to start just doing something creative, and not even really thinking about it being anything spectacular or anything like that, just playing around. And the more I started playing around, I was like, oh, that's a cool sound. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, before I knew it, I was writing a little track, and I felt so much better afterwards. And so I almost sit there and feel like that sometimes you have to force inspiration. You have to force yourself to be inspired. Because
you have to put yourself in the position, I guess, like go outside or pull up to the you were just sitting down to start composing something,
right,
without having no idea, solely to change your mood.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, movies used to do that for me. There are a handful of movies that I think that I watched when I was younger that just really just blew me away, and I wanted to do nothing else but make movies. And and two of those off the top of my head are Top Gun and Back to the Future. And my parents will attest to the fact that I could not sleep at all after we watched that movie. And matter of fact, I think they were telling me that night I sleepwalked and I set the alarm off in the house because I was walking around in my sleep. But
were you wearing a hazmat suit?
No, I was not, but that would have been funny. Movies used to do that for me, but now now that I'm older and I've got two young kids, it's very. I think the most recent movie that I found inspiration in is Knives Out. Which surprised me because I'm not a fan of Rian Johnson, and I don't like what he did to The Last Jedi. But we won't go any further than that. So when I started watching Knives Out, I think my expectations might have been probably low, and I was just completely blown away. And very rarely do I sit for 2 or 3 hours and watch a movie. A lot of times lately, I'm watching movies in installments. And for sure. I couldn't stop watching it. I could not stop watching that movie. It was.
What did you like about it?
I thought it was very well. I mean, everything. I thought it was very well written. The script was very tight, but it was also very well acted. The acting in that, I've always been a big fan of Daniel Craig, and I've always loved him as Bond. He's one of my favorite Bonds. Actually, right after Sean Connery, but so the acting was amazing as well too, but it was also very well photographed. It was very well edited. And everything just seemed to come together in just one amazing cohesive story that was emotionally impactful. I did not see the twist coming. I did not see anything coming. Usually, most films are somewhat predictable to a certain extent, that's probably one of the most recent movies that I can think of off the top of my head that I found really truly inspiring. That and also Better Call Saul, which is an amazing TV show.
I was doing this. And seen Knives Out, so because I don't know what the twist.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't going to give anything away. Don't worry about that. So, if someone wants to get into the business, what advice would you give them?
Oh gosh, it's because I can't really identify with like to be young and trying to be getting into the business now.
Yeah.
just because of the proliferation of media and saturation. How do you get noticed?
Well, and that, you kind of hit the nail on the head right now, right there, is that, there are so many people that are using YouTube and Snapchat and TikTok to break through. I mean, gosh, I can't remember who it was. I saw somebody in Instagram, somebody's Instagram profile saying they were repped by UTA, and I'm like, really? UTA is repping an Instagram influencer? But they are. I mean, that's that's a thing now. So
yeah, it seems like a different world than when I was to get into it. I mean, I would say, like, I know when I got back into, or when I kind of made a move into reality, I cut a lot of sizzle reels for production companies, and that was a really good experience. So it's easier, like, if you're interested in that. It's also a very specific skill.
Right. Agreed.
But, like, development departments at production companies are looking for stuff.
Right.
So if you can just, I mean, not that you're pitching your own stuff. What I'm saying is like, if you find work there,
right?
Maybe that's what I kind of fell into that. I mean, okay. like the one time I responded to an ad on Craigslist, that's the job I got, and I was there for like 2 years. So that's the only job I've ever gotten blindly. Every other was through people I know.
Right.
So it's fascinating, but like, even I don't know. What's your advice?
Well, the first question, I think that that somebody needs to ask themselves is, what do they want? What do you want to do? I mean, that's anytime somebody asks me how to get into this business, that's the first question I ask them is, what do you want to do? Do you want to write? Do you want to direct? Do you want to edit? Do you want to do cinematography?
Yeah.
Because the short answer is you need to do whatever you want to do, which is, if you want to write, you need to write. Writers are writers. So that's the short answer. The longer answer is, how do you get in? How do you get that break? And it is different for every department.
True.
I know with editing and cinematography, and even directing, because I know the Directors Guild still has DGA trainees and whatnot.
Oh, sure.
So if you, I don't know, does the Editors Guild have something like that as well too? Do they have an Editors Guild training program?
No.
I know the Television Academy also has internships. I've been a judge on many of those.
Okay.
And so, I mean, what I did, I thought I wanted to be in the studio system. And so my biggest mistake was, I shouldn't say it's a mistake, because I think everything happens for a reason. And, when I moved out here, I thought I wanted to be in the studio system. I thought I wanted to be a studio executive and parlay that into being a director or a producer or whatever it is. And so I thought that going through the studio system was the way that I needed to do that. And as such, I made a list of all the companies that I wanted to do an internship at, and I called them all. Mm-hmm. I just did blind call. Granted, this was in 1996. So there were no resources on the internet that would allow you to do that. So there was a really big thing called the Hollywood Creative Directory back then. Yeah. That had a list.
That.
Yep, that had a list of all of the production companies and studios and phone numbers and direct numbers for a lot of the executives in those places and whatnot. And I just literally, I blindly called a bunch of people and then I came out to LA for a week and I interviewed around town. I went to Jodie Foster's Egg Pictures. DreamWorks. I had an interview at DreamWorks as well too. I want to say that I had more than one request or approve me or request me or whatever it was, but I say yes, and I ended up going with a company called Phoenix Pictures, and and within a month of interning, I got hired. And that's how I got my foot in the door. Now, that's, I mean, that's if you want to be a studio executive or work in the studio system. I found out after 7 years that I didn't want to do that. And I got back into production and post-production and whatnot. It used to be that in, editors and cinematographers and other departments used to have, kind of mentor protege type things where assistant editors would work for an editor and work their way up to becoming an editor themselves. And to a certain extent, that still happens.
And scripted, it does seem to.
But it doesn't seem to be like there's as much mentoring going on as there used to be in the golden age of filmmaking. But I think for me, I look back on my own journey, and on the one hand, I sit there and say I should have gotten in production. I should have, right out of film school, gotten an internship, with a cinematographer or whatever it is. I have a friend who did something exactly like that. She worked with a big, I want to say Fade and Papa Michael. Anyway. And she's doing cinematography. She does actually a lot of camera for reality and stuff like that as well too. But, on the one hand, I wish that I would have known more what I wanted to do I should have. I mean, I thought I did. I thought I did know. But I will say this: had I not gone through the studio system, I wouldn't have that knowledge. I wouldn't have the knowledge of how things work at a studio. And so it's very valuable information to, and I'm not saying that you can't always just change jobs. If you find that you don't like me, I didn't want to be in the studio system, which is weird because now that I'm a parent of 2 kids, the idea of stability in working at a studio is so much more appealing to me. But, okay, so let's see here.
Well, it's just can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
What you said is like you wish you had known that you didn't, or what you wish you had known that wasn't your path.
Right.
But it's like if you have that itch and you want to do something, you should try it just to find out if it's for you or not.
Right.
Because a lot of times you want things, or one would want or I've wanted things that, ultimately that wasn't a fit for me, or I don't want it enough to go through what it takes to achieve whatever level of success that I was looking for.
Right.
And so there's nothing wrong with that. It's just learning to know yourself.
Well, I would also say too that would be an important reason of why you would want to go to film school as well too, because to be able to try out all of those different things to see what you like, because even in film school, I started out as a cinematography major. Mm-hmm. And, and then it wasn't until I think my second to last semester that I took an editing class and really, really loved editing. I had a really great, but that's also too, I had a really great editing teacher. Whereas, my cinematography teacher, the guy who's head of the cinematography department, I didn't like it. I didn't like him at all. And so, so that has a lot to do with it as well too. So, but,
I would say that was one thing I learned in film school was that I really enjoyed editing. And then I took a documentary class and I really enjoyed documentary editing and the kind of creative options that presented, which, folds into reality. And that would apply for the general, I know there's general production programs, because I know like AFI, you go in as a screenwriter and that's all you do, or a cinematographer, director. So that's different. But if you're looking and trying to get experiment, and because there are some great opportunities in film school, because you can be on a set with a crew, and really see what that feels like.
So the last question that I have is, so everything that's going on in the last 2 months.
What?
Pandemic. Sorry. What are you talking about? What do you see? So, I guess the basic question is how do you see the industry evolving? You know, with how do you see it changing? Do you see it changing? Do you see us getting back to normal? Do you see, you know, how do you see the industry moving forward?
I'd like to say things are going to get back to normal, but I have no way of knowing. I think what's probably going to change is more remote editing is going to be favored. And in fact, I know some shows that are editing, and that's generally not, or at least for security reasons,
right.
There's many reasons why not to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they're going. I think the incentive now is moving that direction.
Right.
What's hard about what I work on, and when I work in reality or competition shows, there is so much collaboration, and to be in the same building with people, like
right, exactly.
It's so inefficient to be working at home. So like, there's just so much that can happen when you're there. Even if, you know, say I have my own system and all that stuff,
right.
that doesn't solve that problem. And texting doesn't always do that.
Even a face-to-face conversation is different than a Zoom conversation. Like we're having a Zoom call right now, but well, we were also friends too, so I'm not sure that our in-person conversation would be less different. But you know, it's when you're face to face with somebody and you're in the same room reacting and responding to, you know, what they're saying, there's a different energy altogether.
Yeah.
And sometimes I know, you know, I've seen it with my wife because my wife has been teaching piano via FaceTime and Zoom and stuff like that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And, you know, it used to, I mean, she generally teaches one or two students at a time. But, you know, on the days where she's got, you know, 2 or 3 more something she is just absolutely 100% drained. And there's something about, you know, having to deal with the technical difficulties of, you know, like one of the simple things that we are dealing with is audio dropouts, and, you know, just because of the internet connectivity. And, you know, so translate that to trying to teach piano is that much more difficult and that much more exhausting. So in that respect alone, being in the same room together is infinitely better than, you know, being on a Zoom call or anything like that. But somebody asked me this question a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of like, well, and it was funny, almost the same, because I was on a live stream when I was asked the question, and that same day, I think later that same day, Hollywood Reporter was talking about a whole bunch of animation projects that just got greenlit, and, you know, because that's one of the things that we were talking about is what kind of content is going to get produced now. I mean, you know, you know this as well as I do. I mean, they're talking about quarantining an entire show for the entire length of the production of that show.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't want people to, you know, to go back and visit their family and get, so it's, you know, it's challenging, but, well, I think that's all I had. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how things change, and I'm very hopeful that they improve or they figure something out. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, no,
I did have a thought, but I forgot what it was. I really did.
That's okay.
I was really kind of depressed for no reason.
Well, yeah, I would. No, I trust me, I totally get it. Jay, I thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hop on this call with me and do this little interview. And I wish that we could be having coffee, beer, or wine, or whatever it was in person, but obviously that's not the case.
I'll do all of that probably after.
There you go. I will do the same, and we'll think of each other as we're doing it. That doesn't sound weird at all.
No, it's not.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much for doing this, and I will talk to you later.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, man.